Welcome to Meet the Moment podcast produced by the Real Estate Business Institute. This podcast is an exploration of what today's industry leaders and agents need to know to be profitable, productive, and have fun. I'm Matthew Rathman, and I'm joined by co-host Kimberly Allard as we chat with thought leaders, brokers, and agents who can help agents meet the moment of change in the real estate industry. All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Meet the Moment podcast. I am your host, and as always, I am partnered here with Kimberly Allard. Kimberly, how you doing?
I'm wonderful. Thanks for having me again. I'm waiting for the day where you tell me your time here is done, but we're still together.
Yeah, we're gonna do this. We're gonna live in separate homes, but we're still gonna be partners. All right. Today, we have with us Jessica Hickok from Arello, and we are really excited. Jessica and I were recently involved in the REBI strategic planning session and got to know each other a little bit. And the more I listened to her share and her ideas and thoughts, I'm like, you have got to be on the Meet the Moment podcast. And here you are. So, Jessica, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me. I was honored to get invited. I mean, I've known you guys, I feel like forever in the way of I've known of you. And I'm so excited to finally get to meet you in person. So thank you.
Well, you know, they say never meet your heroes, or at least just people you know by random acquaintance. So we'll try our best to not scare you off today. Jessica, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, I would love to. First of all, I'll start off with saying my name is Jessica Hickok. I have been in the real estate industry since 1999. So it's been a hot minute here, mostly serving on the realtor side until the last 2 years I came on into the regulatory space, representing the Association of Real Estate License Law Officials. So I serve as their CEO, new to the role as of January of 2024, and taken on a lot of the experience from the other side of the table. And what I mean by that is I started off in 1999 as an unlicensed assistant to a broker that was doing a lot of land real estate. And I was there about a year, and then I moved to another broker who was doing real estate investments and property management. And that's actually where I learned everything about real estate, because I was there almost 14 years after that, and ended up working my way up in that company. It was an independent brokerage in Springfield, Missouri, doing real estate and property management. And I learned everything about the real estate industry there. Then I guess it was approximately 2012, I actually went and became the local association executive for the Greater Springfield Board of Realtors in Springfield, Missouri, which is about a 2,000 member association. And they were regionalizing their MLS. So I had a lot of experience with the MLS side of things, technology, all that background that came into play with that experience, serving on those boards and committees through my realtor involvement. So then I took on the association executive, regionalized the MLS for the Southern Missouri Regional MLS. And then in 2016, I moved my family to Oklahoma City because I became the CEO of the Oklahoma Association of Realtors. I was there almost 7 years before taking this role then with the license law officials. So the Arello, and what that stands for is the Association of Real Estate License Law Officials, representing all of the state jurisdictions and real estate commissions, departments of real estate that are doing the licensing law. So it's a whole new perspective, and bringing my experience from the realtor side of things has been a huge help to integrating the two. So it's been a good ride.
That is a dream resume. I mean, I'm writing it down. I'd be lying to you if I didn't tell you I looked it up, but it's impressive. So you know how to run a transaction. You know how to be in the transaction. You know how to be responsible for the transaction. Then you figured out the MLS part of it. And then on the leadership side, you run a state association. So, well, we're lucky to have you, and so is Arello. So congratulations. That's
well, thank you.
Good resume.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. But I'm listening to this, and what I want is you to teach a class on how you got away with murder all those years, because there's no way in hell that you worked through all from the assistant up to state association and MLS integration and all that, and didn't kill somebody. I don't understand. Maybe that's just me.
Here's what I'll say to that. You and I, all three of us know very, very well that there's always two sides to the story. So it kind of probably depends on who you talk to. But the one thing that I can tell you that brings the career to keeping it is consistency. The one thing I know is I've got a lot of good core values that are consistent with ensuring that our industry is actually being left in a better place than how I found it. So it's not going to always make people happy. It's not always going to make me happy. That's just the ebb and flow of the industry. There's so much change all the time. But in the end, you stick with your core values of ensuring integrity. You stick with your core values of ensuring that you always promise to do what you say you're going to do. And if I'm going to come in and say, hey, we're going to if a board of directors tells me that, yep, we're going to come in and we're going to regionalize our MLS, then great. I'm going to help you regionalize your MLS. And sometimes you just have to push through some of that stuff. So you're right. It probably is a little bit of a how to get away with murder, but at the same time, too, you just have to stick with it.
Yeah, well, thank you for all that you've done for all that period of time in the association. Longevity in this industry is not the norm, and so seeing someone stick it out and put up with all of us realtors and members is quite something. Um, so that's you, and that's your career. So I also, because again, we got to spend a couple of days in Chicago recently, know that you're a little bit of a nerd. So you're a
Probably a big
notion
one.
person and a productivity person. So what does our audience need to know about Jessica other than her resume?
Yes, I do have a little bit of a girl geek background. And that is always, and probably what I have more than anything is always a desire to learn something new. And staying organized and productive is how I have gotten a lot of things done in a short amount of time, is staying productive on those kinds of things. But I'm constantly learning about ways to stay digital. One thing that I want to be is paperless. I just want to be paperless. And so when you start learning about keeping your meeting notes and organizing digitally your life, I get into that. So then when I meet people like you guys, I'm like, oh, you got to see this. And then you guys say, but have you seen this? And I'm like, ooh, I got to write that one down. A new app. Yay.
Oh yeah, we could spend an hour talking about the new stuff.
Yeah, Kimberly, I have to tell you, I went over as I tend to do to get excited and go, let me show you. I'm out here evangelizing. I think it was Notion or something, and Jessica was very kind, like a very patient person who was listening to me talk about how cool this was and all this stuff. And she goes, well, let me show you what I'm doing. And hers looked way tighter and better than mine did. Her dashboard was a lot better.
He's exaggerating.
So I was like, oh, okay. And I kind of slithered back off to my place to sit down. So did you guys see this? And I know our audience can't see this, but I got the Meta AI glasses.
Yeah, brought them to France, right?
I did. I took them to Paris and France, and it interpreted stuff for me and let me listen to couples arguing in French. And I took them to the Louvre, to the museum, and it told me more stuff than the audio tour that we had even asked for. They were
Really?
fantastic. Yeah, they're
We
fun.
may have to get them.
Yeah, I saw you post about them, and that was pretty impressive.
All I need is a small reason to buy a piece of tech, and I'm all over it.
I'm going to do a video about the limitations and the benefits of it. So I would just say hold off until I push the video, because I don't think they're for everybody. I like them.
Isn't there a rumor that Apple's going to have a pair in a couple of years, maybe a year and a half?
Yeah, they got to fix their AI. I'm still bitter about their Apple Intelligence, so I'm not going to hold my breath for that. But that's not what we're here for.
Well, we digress. So
as we tend to do.
Let's get back to our valued guest, because I know our listeners have some questions. Matthew and I are familiar with what a relo is, but I'll be honest with you, for a while it's been, at least for me anyways, it was thrown around the industry. And, maybe a decade ago, I didn't even have any clue as to what it was. So can you kind of share for our listeners what a relo's role is in our real estate ecosystem, if you will?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. First, I'll address very candidly kind of what you said as far as there's a lot of people that know that a relo exists. So I will go as far to say everybody knows a relo exists. The problem is nobody really knows what we do or what our role is or what our lane is. And so one of the things that the Arello Board of Directors, who is a very forward-thinking board of directors, they have just overhauled their governance structure to be more quick and nimble. And our board of directors is only 13 people representing the entire nation. Because Arello technically is an international organization, because we do represent some jurisdictions in Canada. And so we got some Canadian provinces that participate in our licensing verifications and jurisdictions and get involved in our events. But to be nationwide and have a small, nimble, quick, efficient board of director structure has done wonders for Arello. So they are very forward thinking in not just their governance structures, but one of the things that they did was they did a brand new strategic plan back in January of 2024, right when they hired me. I think I'd been on the job for about 10 minutes and they were like, here's your strat plan. And we're doing that this week. And which is great because I love strat planning. And so I love to jump in on that stuff. But one of the things that they had done in their final strategic plan was Arello needs to improve their brand awareness. Everybody knows Arello exists. Nobody really knows what we do. So that was the first thing we dove right into, was about Arello and what we do and how we get here. So circling back, Kimberly, to answering your question about what it is that we do quite a few things in representing the real estate regulatory bodies of each state. Some states call them departments of real estate. Some states call them real estate commissions. So I'm going to use terms interchangeably here and say a real estate commission is the regulatory body of who is giving the license. So I have always said, from the realtor perspective, that the point of entry was the local board of realtors. And I actually have to back off of that a little bit, because that's really not the point of entry. That's the point of entry into a membership association. But the point of entry where people are coming in is at the licensing point. They're coming in and they're applying for a license. You know, we could even go a step further and say, actually, it's probably in the pre-licensed schools where the point of entry into our industry is. But I'll come back to that in a minute and say, with the licensing, what they look at is what kind of candidate is applying for a license that is a vetted candidate that's taken their courses, their pre-license education, taken the exam, and is now applying for licensure to practice real estate. So Arello then steps in as support for that, and we accredit the national exam. So if there is a real estate provider out there, a real estate exam provider out there that is administering the test for the national portion of the real estate exam, they use an Arello accreditation, which means that we have a committee, an exam accreditation committee, that goes through every question that's on the test to make sure that it's a viable question, it's relevant to the industry, and that it matches what the job task is of a real estate licensee in the industry. So we accredit that national exam, which then helps with reciprocity in states. So for instance, if you take the licensing exam in Virginia there, Matthew, and then you want to move to Massachusetts, where Kimberly is, if you've taken that national exam and your state participates in the Arello accreditation, that you won't have to take the national exam again in your new state if you were going to apply for a license. So a lot of our focus is on the exam accreditation piece of that. Now, morphing out of that, we also do a lot of distance education certifications. Now, we do not certify content on that, but we have a couple of credentials, a CDEI, Certified Distance Education Instructor. Plus, we actually certify courses that are being done through our IDEC program, which is the International Distance Education Committee. And what they do is they look at the course design and development and the way that a course is given. So, and it's just in distance education. So we do a lot of that, but then we also do things like have a license verification system. So anybody that is wanting to verify an active license, they can go to the Arello.com website and verify a license. And you can do that one at a time, or you can subscribe to our API. If you're a prop tech company or an MLS that needs to verify an actual active licensee, you can subscribe to our API, and then you can have that verification system all the time. So we have a big data portion to everything that we do as well. So you got education, exams. We focus a lot on data, but then we also look at we track all the regulatory changes. So a lot of newsletters we do, a lot of white paper research, content data that we track for bringing in to digest all that information and tell people what pass rates are on licensing, what current requirements are needed for continuing education. So Arelo's role is to support the state jurisdictions, but to provide good quality information and networking resources to the industry.
I have well, first of all, I couldn't be happier with all that. Thank you. But I have a little bit of a follow-up question. Is it up to the states to voluntarily cooperate with Arello, or?
It is.
Yeah, so it's important to know that there are some states that have just chosen not to, I don't want to say cooperate, but provide data or even be part of this bigger initiative that makes us all essentially safer and the consumer.
You're right. They can, but I will tell you what we're taking is public data for our license verification system. So where we have almost all of our states are participating in the license verification piece of it. Not all of our states are members, because I should back up and say we're a national trade association. So we are representing these real estate commissions, and it's the regulators that are joining us as members. So it's not the licensees that are joining us as members. It's the regulatory body, which could be the state real estate commission staff, or it could be the actual commissioners, most of which are gubernatorial appointments from the state. They can join the association, Arello, if they want to, but they don't have to be a member in order to give us the data feed. So really, quite frankly, what we try to do and keep up with is building and establishing a relationship, whether they are a member or not, with that regulatory body and asking them for a data feed into this. Now, sometimes they do it, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they say, well, we'll send it to you quarterly. Although that's changing quite a bit, we can take the data whether they're a member or not.
Great. It's a whole lot to digest.
Yeah, it's a lot.
There's a lot going on there. I think I'm not sure. I don't know if I'm a subscriber or a member. I'm not sure what the designation is, but I do have. I am, I guess, a member of Arello, and I get to log in. And to me, as an instructor, the case law library is absolutely outstanding. And already, I have found some case law that I had asked actually ChatGPT to help me research and Perplexity to help me research, and it gave me stuff that I kind of knew it wasn't false, but it wasn't accurate to what I was actually asking, and it wasn't real estate related. They were giving me contract cases, and I was able to go to Arello and log in and go to the case law library and find exactly what I was looking for to sustain my position in a certain class that I was writing. So, I mean, I love that. I am a CDEI
Yes.
designee, and I will be honest. The first time I took it, I was struggling, but the second time it was super good. Like the most current version that I took for renewal was really good as an instructor, to fine tune a couple skills and talk about the adult learning and um, I know that a lot of your distant learning materials and resources are on there, and I know also that some states, and I don't want to say all, but some state regulators rather, are having very real issues with online learning and distance learning, and it's the associations get the feedback of we want more in-person classes, but that's not what agents are actually attending. So they're clearly more interested in the online learning, and there's just not a lot of guidelines. So really appreciative for those areas in addition to all the other data collection and curating you're doing. And I mentioned ChatGPT and Manet. You recently wrote an article about AI, and it's connected to the you can go to arello.org and take a look at it. I think there's a paywall to read all of it, but you can read the beginning of it anyways. And it's a little bit about the AI's role and what regulators have to consider. And obviously, we just did an episode on AI, and I
Yes.
launched more into the risk management side than we had intended to, but it's such a big issue. And even just this week, Perplexity is now the AI backend for a social media platform called True Social. And Meta and Grok and now Perplexity are all tied to social media accounts, which is where they're learning, and they're coming up with some very bizarre answers and some quasi racist stuff and some hyper political stuff that is inaccurate and some lies and some it's a mess, the social media driven systems. So what with this kind of, you've got these systems that are driven and learning by social media, you got these that are a little bit cleaner and working harder. The US government just issued some executive orders with some conflicting and interesting approaches to governing AI and what the future of it's going to look like. What is our regulators doing? Or like you wrote a little bit about this, but tell us a little bit about how regulators should be thinking about AI and what is actually happening in our world.
Well, I think the regulators are taking it from a perspective, not from the typical perspective of what can AI do for us. It's more about how are we going to regulate AI and what it's doing for those in the industry that are practicing real estate. So the question that remains front and center for us at Arello is, how are we going to regulate AI when it comes to unlicensable activity? So, as you guys have talked about on your podcast, which I have listened to them and think you guys do an amazing job. So, thank you for sharing that content with people because that's extremely helpful. The more that people talk about AI, the more we learn about it. And some of it's going to be right and some of it's going to be wrong. If I were to walk away giving any piece of advice on this podcast, particularly, I would say absolutely don't trust social media as the source of truth. Social media, and that's actually sending that kind of stuff to Grok and training these AI models, you're going to have inaccurate information. And anytime you come to using AI, you have to trust but verify. And you do have to still do some verification, just not trust it completely, do some verification on that. But coming back to the front and center question is, how are we going to regulate AI when it comes to unlicensable activity? There are two types of AI that are kind of coming out in all of this as we continue to study this and as it develops. And that's generative AI and there's agentic AI. So the generative AI is more question and answer type stuff. The agentic AI is what is going, that AI particularly is being the first to make contact with others. So it's really hard to explain, and I'm not going to dive too far into those deep details, but if you are searching a website for a piece of property, you can ask the chat bot on there, which is probably generative AI, what is this property listed for? And they will come back and tell you what that property is listed for or something to that effect. You can ask it, is there a basement in this property or whatever? And you can ask it that question and it'll respond. Now, what happens when AI continues to develop as it's doing and you move to another site and then all of a sudden there's something that pops up on your screen and says, hey, if you're still looking for a house with a basement, I found one for you over here. Now that AI takes you to another website, and before you know it, they're telling you about a piece of property, the price, the sales price, or the list price of it, whether or not it has 3 bedrooms or 4 bedrooms, and it has a basement. Would you like for me to set you up a showing for that property? Or would you like for me to tell you about this property, or do you want to make an offer on this property? Now you've got a chat bot that is acting as an agent to an end user, a consumer, that may or may not know they're chatting with the chatbot. They may think they're chatting with an actual real estate broker, but they don't know exactly. And now you're going, hey, wait a minute. Is this AI chatbot licensed? Because it's now doing licensable activity by sharing a sales price, by negotiating, offers, by taking and giving information that is required to have a license for. So how are we going to regulate that? That's the big question right now that we're talking about. So the reason why regulators are keeping AI at the forefront is for the question of how do we regulate AI when it comes to unlicensable activity. That's the first thing.
Well, isn't it just like, I mean, and not just like, but similar to, people going on the internet for medical advice? I mean,
Yeah.
you got to hold them responsible at some point, but, you know, disclosures, this is a chatbot. This is not a real person.
Yeah, we're back to that trust but verify thing. And we need to inform the consumers about the importance of working with an active licensee. And if you want to take that further and work with a realtor, you know what? You can take that further and actually work with a professional that's in the industry that has additional continuing education and additional, codes of ethics that they follow. That verification of that identity is extremely important that I hope our industry starts putting more focus on.
Yeah, Kimberly, to your point, there was a report that came out recently that was done over the past 12 months, and it basically said that AI was better at identifying and diagnosing medical conditions than doctors were, but it was absolutely horrible at coming up with treatments. I'll be able to speak in a minute. That is important when you're doing a podcast. That I,
It's the,
usually
it's
don't
the
lose it.
bourbon, it's the bourbon there, Matthew. We've talked about that.
You know what? There are no rules in podcasting. I can drink a fifth before this podcast. I thoughts come more freely. It's freeing, that and some gummies. But I
The truth comes out then.
no, you know what? It's my life, my body. I can do what I want with it. No, I look, I have a little bit of concern. I have a lot of concerns about AI, although I think it's also the best tool that I've ever had in my life, and a likely best tool any of us have ever had. But I have a lot of concern about the regulation of it. And this podcast will not be entirely about AI. We just did something about that, but there's so many people trying to come up with rules that don't understand the technology that I'm concerned we're going to have this constricting policy come out. Like some MLSs have had some bizarre rules that have been sent to me because I teach a lot of this stuff that it doesn't make any sense to me. On the flip side, and I won't say the product here because I don't think it's ready for, I don't think agents should be using it yet, but there's a particular product that I've been playing with that is essentially like a GPT chat bot where you can program it with the content you want. And so I took and uploaded our state licensing law, our MLS rules, everything I've ever written about for my blog about my community and my practice, and a bunch of other content. And it consistently gave absolutely convincing and amazing answers to questions in a very human way, to the point that I felt it was more competent than just about 75% of the agents that I've ever talked to who would know about this, including some instructors and brokers who have been around for a bit. And then you start asking it for an opinion, and that's where you get into trouble. When
Yeah.
you start saying, is this the best for my family, or should I make an offer? Should I get a home inspection? And it was absolutely horrific answers. So, again, like that study with the doctors, it may be good at telling you what's wrong with you. It's not good at helping you solve the problem or heal from it. So, but I'm glad to see that Arello is dealing directly with the regulators. And again, you have a conference coming up in a few months where I understand some of the topics will be helping the regulators understand what the benefit of what the product actually is. Because a lot of times this industry has shied away from things they didn't understand early on and created bizarre limiting rules that did not allow us to serve the consumer better. And AI in its proper use could actually enhance significantly every agent to provide an exceptional level of service that we before now never could have. So,
Yeah.
yeah, thank you for your work in that.
Oh,
I feel it's like, let's just go back to basics. AI is newer for obviously, but like anything, driving a car is dangerous if you've got 5 martinis in you. Don't do it. Using AI could be dangerous if you rely on it for things that you need to rely on somebody with a license and an education and for major life decisions. So, hopefully that's common sense. But why we're talking about issues that are of concern, you know, obviously Arello does quite a bit of monitoring here. So can you share with us if you happen to have this data aggregated about what you're seeing, maybe some hot buttons or emerging trends, maybe other than AI, or anything you see coming from consumer complaints, or if anything along that way that our listeners might want to know about.
I would love to. I'm actually doing a presentation next week. I was invited by the Denver Metro Board of Realtors, the local Denver Metro Association of Realtors, to come talk to their brokers next week. And I'm actually doing it in person next week. I'm excited about it because I'm making a co-presentation with the executive director of the Colorado Department of Regulatory Agencies, Marcia Waters. And we are going to go over basically the top 10 disciplinary actions that we are seeing in our disciplinary action database. So, as I mentioned, we have a license verification database or a license verification system, but we also have a disciplinary action database that our regulator members can use. And what that does is that tells us if a licensee applying for a license, again, I'll use your guys' state again. If a licensee is applying for a license in Virginia and they were an axe murderer in Massachusetts, that needs to kind of pop up in a disciplinary action. Now, I'm being dramatic with that, but what if they do have sanctions against them for how they handled escrow monies, or maybe they have sanction against them for how they handled, a contract issue or some other violation, be it advertising or something, and they had their license suspended or revoked in Massachusetts. Well, you'd want to know that if there was any kind of sanctions on that. So we keep a disciplinary action database, and that we call the DADB. So that then gives us reporting about some of the top disciplinary actions that are coming out so that we can share that with our education providers like you, Matthew. We can say, here's the list of disciplinary actions that we're seeing. Brokers need to watch out for this, but educators, you need to train people on these types of things. So I'll run down this list really fast. I won't go into detail of it, but probably one of the very top ones, these are actually in no particular order, and these are coming in from all states. So it could vary in one state or another of what's a higher priority of a disciplinary action. But the biggest one that we see a lot is broker supervision or failure to supervise. Brokers, we need a lot of education for our brokers out there. And if they are constantly getting sanctioned for a lack of supervision or a failure to supervise, that's a problem. So how do we change that? So we see a lot of disciplinary actions in property management, particularly people practicing outside of their expertise. So licensees practicing outside of their expertise by managing properties when they don't know landlord-tenant laws. So we see a lot of that. And then, of course, escrow accounts and property management. We see a lot of unlicensed activity, particularly with teams and how teams are operating. Unlicensed activity there, wholesaling. We see a lot of Facebook activity of people sharing and acting as the real estate agent for sharing their next door neighbor's house that they posted on social media and saying, yeah, I can hook you up with them. We see a lot of that. So unlicensed activity is a big disciplinary action that we see. But there's other things like not completing their continuing education. Most of the time that's audit driven, but we're seeing a lot of disciplinary actions in licensees not completing their CE in a timely manner. And then on top of that, we also see some very heavy disciplinary actions in advertising, failure to maintain their E&O insurance, failure to disclose a felony when they go to renew their license. And then a big one is misrepresentation of property data. So I just gave you my whole presentation to the Denver Metro brokers for next week. So,
well, Matthew and I are feverishly writing down because this is great stuff. But look, I want to ask you this question.
Okay.
What if the state requires a public record request to view any discipline? How is, I mean, and I'll go a step further. In some states, the licensing board will not provide the responsible broker with any discipline or pending discipline for an agent that they are 100% responsible for, because they think it's some type of defamation of character or violating somebody's privacy. So how do what's the recommendation to get around that?
Kimberly, I'm actually not going to be able to speak directly to answering that because it varies by state. Open Records Acts and Sunshine Laws, all of that varied by state as far as getting that. So I'm not going to be able to give you any specifics because, again, Arello isn't actually we're not regulating the actual thing. We're just acting as the trade association that's representing them and compiling data for them. So I'm not going to be able to answer that directly, but I can certainly put you in contact with the with a couple of commissioners and or executive directors that'll be able to answer that.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not. I guess it's not a matter of changing it as much as it is for any broker, depending upon what state you're in, and our listeners specifically, to understand that there are times where you may not know that your own agents have had some type of violation or been found in violation of some license law, and then in other cases, they might be found in a database, if you will, that might be accessible, more accessible to the public. So, I mean, I
Right.
think, a lot of these things stem from the lack of broker supervision. But when the broker may not even have access or know that their agents have had filed charges against them, So
Right.
I guess the message here is be proactive. Don't wait for somebody to tell you, know what these things are, and take steps to keep tabs on your agents.
Right. You're
You know, it's
absolutely right.
I'm I'm listening to like Jessica used a scenario an axe murder in Massachusetts here in Virginia. In Virginia, we would just call that disorderly conduct. So there, it's different standards. So I'm licensed in DC, Maryland, Virginia as a broker, and each state handles it, or each jurisdiction, I should say, handles it a little bit different. Virginia, you can go look up any licensee right now and see any record
Yep.
from licensing to whatever. Now you can find that on the website. And as a broker, we actually routinely go and check. We do have an onboarding form that asks them, have you been in violation or found in violation or even investigated in the past 5 years of any regulatory issues? But I will say it's not an end all be all for me. When you start reading a lot of those records, sometimes you look at it and go, there's no consistency here. There's been 5 similar fact patterns, and it was just a matter of, were you unlucky enough to get in front of the most conservative member of the real estate board that day? And then there's other ones that you're like, wow, that was really bad, and how does this person still have a license? So it's kind of a mixed bag, and in a lot of the states that I've done work in, or we've asked for this kind of records, it's a mixed bag of there's not a consistent accountability
Yeah.
level here. Like a broker A could forget to report their agent for mishandling escrow, and it's don't do it again, and then broker B is given a 6-month suspension.
You got
So it's very challenging to see continuity or consistency in some of the states and jurisdictions we do this in. The list that you've given, oddly, there's a lot of these things that are frequent flyers, and every time I've seen a similar list, broker supervision seems to be the number one thing. And it feels very much like, and maybe you can speak to the conversation you've had at Arello. This was not a uh, scripted part of our conversation, but now I'm interested. Um, on it seems to me that there's a distancing of keeping the broker accountable for their agents' activities, as we start to see new models emerge where that agent may never even met that broker, or the broker has so many people it's not humanly possible to follow up on everything that they're doing. Do you see a trend there with a distancing of keeping the broker accountable, or do you think it's going the other way where states are hammering the brokers a little bit more?
I could probably answer that one way today, and then my mind may change here next month on that, just because our industry is changing so quickly, too.
Sure.
We had such a rise in licenses, in issuing licenses
Mhm.
from the pandemic up to today. And now we're kind of starting to see some of that taper off a little bit. That's just the nature of the beast in the industry. You're going to see cycles, ebbs and flows of lots of licensees coming in, lots of them dropping off. That's just, it doesn't matter if there's a pandemic or not. You're going to see cycles like that in our industry. I think that there's a lot of people that come in and say, I'm going to get a broker's license. And while it's easy to go through the steps to get the broker's license and do the education and stuff, sometimes I think that, to answer your question of, do I see a trend going one way or another? It depends. If the education licensing is easy to obtain a broker's license, people are going to obtain a broker's license and they may not realize that they're in over their head and how much work actually comes along with it.
Yeah.
And they may not realize all of that until they're having to stand in front of the commission answering for somebody that they thought was going to do a great job in selling real estate, one of their salespeople underneath of them. And now they're being sanctioned for that. Now, does that mean they don't care? No, it doesn't mean they don't care. But you can't say ignorance is bliss either. You can't say, that, well, I just didn't know, so therefore that's it. So, there's lots of ways I could answer that question. Am I seeing a trend towards brokers doing their own thing and going their own direction on things? Is what I believe you asked me there, Matthew, was, everybody's doing it differently. Yeah, because I think there's a lot of unique ways to do the industry, to do business as a broker, to do business as a brokerage, and saying, here's how we do things. Teams are coming up that are getting creative with how they handle things. And sometimes that team leader is not the broker, but they're identified as the broker of the team because they're the name on the team. Or, there's a lot of that going on too. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but I think there's a multitude ways of answering the question when you say, are we seeing trends?
Like the Real Estate Business Institute has both the CRETS program, which is a team leader development program, and then the CRB for brokers.
Yep.
And unfortunately, we just don't see people crashing through the door to take those classes. We see a lot of people who are very serious about their careers coming in taking that. And every time we teach those classes, there's people who have been brokering for years who go, oh, I didn't think about that. I didn't know that. I didn't. And to the conversation we had earlier, we have no way of proving or disproving what I'm saying, other than Kimberly and I have been on professional standards for eons. You as AE or CEO have had to oversee those. I would say 10% of the people that have come before our committees from an ethics standpoint, or whose case studies I've reviewed through all the resources we have, 10% of those were nefarious. They knew they were harming someone. They did it anyways for their own benefit. The other 90%, it's lack of broker supervision. It's lack of training. It's because we, for some reason, said on the job training is okay for this very complex industry. I would love to see, we say this all the time, we'd love to see a higher standard, especially for brokers, of training and certification beyond just X number of years with no discipline. And they took a class that really very closely similar. It looks like the pre-licensing class they took in initial parts of that.
This occurred to me at some point in my career, and I don't know when. It probably wasn't that long ago. But think about a plumber or an electrician. I've had both at my house, and I remember if there's I don't know what the entry level electrician is called, but his senior electrician or hers is standing right there. So the junior electrician does all the work, does all the wiring, does all this, and then the senior electrician looks at it. Yes, that's right. No, it isn't. They're there. They're physically there. They're literally overseeing it. Same thing with the plumber. I had a plumber come in to change a mixing valve on the shower. The senior plumber's standing there. The junior plumber's getting filthy. That is supervision. It occurred to me after I spent 6 years on our licensing board here that many people in the licensing arena that are not practitioners actually think that the broker has direct oversight to the agent's activities. In fact, I was in a discussion one day, and a member of the I don't know if it was a board member or a staff member said, "Well, how would you not know whether the agent was there or not?" And I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" I said, "There are brokers in this state that are directly responsible for hundreds and maybe 1,000. Not that I'm aware of, at least in this state, but hundreds, well over 500. And they haven't seen some of these agents in person, if ever, in years." So it doesn't occur to a lot of the people who are responsible for either enforcing or making or approving regulations that brokers do not ever, if ever, have direct oversight over their agents, even though the laws think they do or they should. So, and I've said this to Matthew and probably anybody who will listen, we don't have a malicious intent problem in this country. We don't have a antitrust issue. We have an education issue.
You got it. Nailed it. Nailed it. Yeah. But I think I think you both have just spotlighted the reason for good partnerships in our industry. That's why I'm so thankful that Arello was invited by REBI to participate in your strategic planning. And we've had several other organizations also reach out to us about it too, because when we want to be a resource for licensing regulatory bodies, when they're having issues, if I can say to them, hey, you really need to probably encourage them to look into this, look into the REBI organization here first. Look at what they offer for broker training. I'm a big fan of the right hand needs to know what the left hand is doing. So if we in the industry are collaborating together to make our industry better, we can help with the licensing law and telling you all of the things that brokers are doing wrong or licensees are doing wrong, or what the disciplinary actions are. If we can team up with those who are educating the license, or the licensees or the members of the organization to make them better, then that's where your true point of entry is at that education point.
And not to take credit away from where credit's due, because we know what our license law officials are doing across this country. For the most part, it's great, great good. But let's be reminded that it was likely the Realtor Code of Ethics that was used to develop most of the license law in this country, and not the other way around. So although, and this isn't a bid for realtor membership, it's simply the Realtor Association, or a professional trade association, was the first to recognize that we needed some guardrails back, 100+ years ago. And we've been enforcing those things. And then license law followed into the early 50s, as of course you know.
Right.
So, that's just a perfect example of working collaboratively. So
Yes.
although a lot of license law officials who may not be Realtor members may be just saying, well, that's the realtors, that's not us. Why reinvent the wheel? We've already got the language. The code of ethics is more strict and then than our regulations in my state. So,
Right.
why try to reinvent the wheel? Having said that, I am looking at, and because I wanted to share this, a document that not you, but Arello produced in the spring of 2021 called "Is Real Estate Licensing Necessary?" Now, I'm not going to quiz you on this, but it is just it's an impressive piece of work.
Thank
So,
you.
can you share with our listeners what else they might find for resources at the Arello site, like white papers and things like that, just briefly?
Yes, I'll do it very briefly. First, in regards to the paper that you are referencing, we are looking at doing some updates to many of our papers, and I know that one's on the list here. In the meantime, I am going to tell you about a good book that I have just recently finished called The Licensing Racket. It was just published this year. It's by Rebecca Haw Allensworth. And the licensing racket talks mostly about occupational licensing, but it does involve a little bit of real estate licensing and, the need for the licensing jurisdictions on that. Now, a lot of the stuff in the book I don't necessarily agree with, but it is the way that regulation is working in the United States. So it's something that we should all be familiar with. Now, and it's a great book. It really is. But to your point about the papers and the research papers that we have, we do a lot of research papers. We have an excellent law and policy committee, mostly made up of the general counsels of the regulatory bodies. So the attorneys that are in this all the time. They just refreshed, and they're actually going to release it, I believe, at our September conference. They have refreshed the broker office manual white paper that talks about what should be in a broker office manual to comply with the fiduciary duties of your state laws. Now, it doesn't outline it for specific states, but it says, here's an example of broker supervision practices. So we just updated that. We have research and white papers that are on private listing networks and the impacts that it has. I will tell you, Arello does not lobby. And we don't do, we'll do advocating. We'll advocate for what's right for the industry, but advocacy and lobbying, we don't do as a trade association, but we will release impact statements of how it will impact the industry. That's one thing that the National Association of Realtors is great at, and that members should be paying attention to, is the advocacy piece and the lobbying of what they can do to affect change. But again, we have to work together on that. But we are doing things like Matthew had said, our case law library. We keep an update of all of the case law that's happening regarding the regulatory industry part of this. So the body there. So we have research white papers. We have a lot of data reports that are coming out, and they are only getting better. We hired on a rock star, an industry rock star, for our data innovations that we're doing to make our reports better. And so we're really excited about what the future holds for Arello. So more of that's coming. You can find it on our website. If you're not a real estate commissioner and you're not a real estate commission staff, that is okay. You can still join our association as an affiliate member. The difference there between the affiliate member and the regulatory body is that our mission is to represent the regulatory bodies, but our affiliate members, the only difference there is they can't serve on our board of directors, but they still have access to all of our data, our research, our digest. We have a digest that contains a lot of actual data that's coming out of the commissions, as I mentioned, like pass rates on exams or continuing education hours if you're needing to do some research there. But the case law library you have access to. You also have access to these reports that we're doing, that we're updating regarding these hot topic issues.
Great.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And not only is I know who you just hired, and not only is he a rock star, he's also one of the nicest guys I've ever met. We were kids in this industry back in the day when I met him. So good snag there.
Thank you. It's Daniel Rothamel, Kimberly. If I don't know if you know him or not. He's actually based out of South Carolina now, but yeah, he is an industry rock star, and he knows data inside and out. And he's only been here about 6 weeks on the job, but man, he has jumped in full force to really better what Arello is putting out in our data reporting. So there's some good things on the horizon here.
It's exciting.
Yeah. I got a great team back at Arello. I've got a really good team that is handling and taking care of all of these different arenas that we have in the regulatory spot.
That's awesome. It's good to hear there's a team together. You have lots of data, lots of resources, a lot of influence on our regulators, which is fantastic because it's needed now more than ever. I think it's getting more and more complex. Kimberly, I will say there is one area in which the Code of Ethics is not a higher standard, and then that is in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We have a fairly new, just 5 years ago, regulation that says if you have a business card, there has to be at least one way to contact you on that card. Because apparently I don't know the story, but apparently we needed a rule to say business cards should have a way to contact you. I don't know who was if you just pass out a business card, it's just your face. That's like those little photos that you got at school. Remember when you had more pictures of yourself than friends and you would just hand them to everybody in class?
Who's using business cards is my question. Who's using business cards? Aren't we all using digital things? No.
I still have 1,500 of the 2,000 business cards I ordered in 2019, and that's not an exaggeration. I don't know. Jessica, thank you so much for joining us. Is there anything you want to wrap up with? Anything you want to tell us we didn't ask, or you think everybody should know to help them keep their careers safer and their clients better served?
I think that we could probably keep this conversation going for probably several hours on end here, because I know that there's so much that needs to be done in our industry, but there's so much opportunity on both sides of it. I think, if anything, the takeaway from all of this is I want anybody who's listening to your podcast that's involved in the industry to know that Arello is an industry partner. We are here. We will work with you. We will absolutely be open. We'll share information because that's the only way everything's going to get better in our industry. So anything that we can do to help inform, anything that we can do to help add to conversations or bring a voice from the regulator's perspective, please give me a call. I'd be happy to talk to you about it. So,
and I would like to add, for our realtor members that are listeners, Arello does meet at our annual conference, although Arello is not a realtor organization. I'll clarify that. You do have a meeting at our national conferences,
We
which
do.
I have been in, sat through and been through. So, is it open to guests?
It is, yeah. So you can attend that meeting. It's on the NAR annual schedule. I will also tell you too that we do quarterly webinars with NAR info exchanges that we call them, where NAR tells us kind of what they're working on. We tell them what we're working on, and that's open to anybody. So that next one that's coming up, I believe, is August 27th, and I can send you guys the information on that. You can also find it on our website, but we'll do a NAR Arello info exchange via webinar quarterly. And then at the two conferences, the Realtors Legislative meetings in DC what used to be May, now is going into June. But, and then I believe we'll be in Houston in November. So,
No excuses.
so yeah, so
no excuses.
there you go. There you go. We'd love to have anybody. So.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Jessica, for sharing all the work that you and your team is doing, your team of rock stars, and helping everybody. You do. I did read that you even have training for regulators, so people who are listening. We have a lot of people in the leadership side who listen to our podcast, so certainly go check out the Arello website. Reach out to Jessica.
Yeah, it's called Commissioner College, and it's on our website as well. So if you want to think about being a commissioner someday, we can help you there too.
Well, thank you so much for being here. So this is how we wrap up every episode. We ask, well, starting with you as our guest, to share a app, a website, a tool, something that will help people in their day-to-day business.
Well, I'm going to say Notion because I'm a big Notion nerd. A big Notion nerd. One thing that I will tell you that I have absolutely loved lately is using Spark Mail for my email client. Now, I know you're probably saying, well, email, really? Are you serious? But they have an AI meeting note taker that is phenomenal for grabbing meeting notes in all of these multiple Zoom meetings that you have, keeping track of it. And I know Notion has one as well, and there's several of them out there. But Spark Email platform has been a game changer for me in keeping a lot of the AI regulation, or the AI regulation of my email inbox, my to-do list, my calendar, and keeping meeting notes. It's been a great thing to keep me productive. So that's probably my big one.
It was actually the first AI powered email client too. And so it does really good summaries and recommendations. And if you're a team, I do recommend the same app for teams because you can have collaborative boxes and there's a lot of security things. If you're one of our CRETS folks, one of our team leaders, or you're running a small team with assistants and things, it's a super good platform. That's a good one. That was a good pull.
Well,
all right, Kimberly.
Oh, I forgot for a minute that I was a co-host. Here I am. I'm enthusiastic like I'm a listener. But
she's like, I got a new email client.
Okay, so maybe not new to many people, but as a reminder, as independent contractors, as most of us are in our brokerage, we have an obligation to report our taxes and things like that. So something that helps you track your actual mileage driven, but doing it automatically, allows you to snap receipts and upload them right away to your bookkeeping. I use the QuickBooks mobile app, which is included in a QuickBooks Online subscription. It's not cheap, and they're not sponsoring us, but I just feel like everything we do is on the go right now. And if I can have one less thing that does one more thing, I'm in there. So the QuickBooks mobile app for snapping receipts, tracking your mileage, all that stuff, and it does it automatically. So
wait, you're saying we have to pay taxes? All right.
Oh,
don't lose your license. Don't lose your license because you didn't pay your taxes.
yeah, really. Okay, so I'm sorry.
What do you have for us?
Yeah, so I have fallen in love with this. It's called the DIA web browser, DIA web browser. And if you're not familiar, it's from a company called the browser company who their big fame was the Arc browser, which was very popular for a while. They kind of end of life that to work on this project. So DIA, it unfortunately only works on Mac right now. But if you don't have a net Mac, I mean, are you even a business person? But anyways, Dia integrates your ChatGPT account in everything that you do. So if I'm sitting on a website and I want to ask a question and interact with that website, I can just hit the button and it's personalized just like my ChatGPT. So it knows what I'm looking for, how to speak to me, and how to engage. It's Chromium based, which means if you're using Google Chrome, it'll pull all of your plugins, all of your favorites, your bookmarks, everything over in one click. And it's a slicker, much more sexier looking browser than Chrome ever has been, and it gives me kind of that Safari vibe I like of just the design and the simple UI. But AI is built into everything, and it has something called skills. So like I can just hit /tweet, and it'll take whatever I want to say, make it into an SEO rich tweet or X post or Facebook post or whatever, and does it all on the fly and sends it. I can take 4 tabs, let's just say 4 or 5, however, unlimited. Let's say I have 4. I'm thinking about getting a new, I don't know, car, whatever. I could take the 4 tabs that I have open in the browser, connect them, and say, ChatGPT, give me a comparison and a chart of comparing these 4 products that I'm getting ready to look at and purchase. Which one, based on what you know me, is best? And ChatGPT goes to work in the background and does it. It gives me summary of pages. It'll read stuff to me. It'll do excerpts. It's a beautiful, beautiful product. The skills are that you create your own. It's like little GPTs in your browser. You can create your own, or they're the whole library of recipes and skills that they have pre-created for you to help you with summary, and you can automate things on your tabs. It's got multiple profiles. So like I have one that can break away and it's just streaming, and I can watch shows on it and then keep working on the other browser. It's super, super powerful, and it's free, absolutely free.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because you'd mentioned that a few weeks ago to me, and I had wrote it down and then set it aside. So I'm glad you brought it up again, because I'm looking at this going, wow, that's cool.
It is pretty neat. I have one on there called Ad Writer, and that's a skill that I created using ChatGPT, and so I could pull up on my old blog post and just type Ad Writer, and it creates 4 or 5 sample social media posts to promote that blog post or my website, and it could even automate sending it out, and I could automate it to do that on different intervals if I wanted to, say, randomly pick a blog post to do this. It's brilliant, and like I said, it's free, and I've loved it. And normally I wind up playing with something for a while and I go right back to Chrome just because it's warm. Everything that worked in Chrome worked here, and I haven't had a single problem with it. So
I may be downloading it now.
yeah.
Me too, Kimberly. Me too.
The one problem I have, I will say, if you go to the toolbar or the landing page, you can't just do a Google search. You have to go to Google. If you do a search, it'll be a ChatGPT search. And I've had the hardest time remembering that. So I'm like, go find Nike running shoes. I don't want that in my ChatGPT history. That's a Google thing. But we are quickly coming up on the point, and we'll do a future episode of this. Google's going away. SEO is going away. Chat's going to be, or some type of AI is going to be where it's at. So I'm okay with it. Yeah. Jessica, again, thank you so much. Kimberly, as always, it was fun hanging out. Thank you, guys. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
The Meet the Moment podcast is a production of the Real Estate Business Institute, an affiliate of the National Association of Realtors. Special thanks to CEO Jenny Scheib and to Dan Shea, our editor and content producer. The views and ideas expressed in this podcast are not necessarily shared or endorsed by REBI. All recommendations made in this episode were merely provided as best practices. The practices of any realtor are subject to the Realtor Code of Ethics, the laws and licensing jurisdiction, broker policies, and competent legal advice. Visit www.rebinstitute.com for more information, resources, education, and upcoming events.